Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our live stream, Making the Holidays Safer Together. I'm Luke. I'm co-founder of Braving Healing. I'm joined here with my partner, Kat.
Who is also a co-founder of Braving Healing and Survivor.
And we have a delightful experience we're all in for tonight. We have a wonderful group of people. But before I jump into introducing all of our lovely folks sitting around our virtual table, tonight we're going to be talking heavily about protecting the kiddos in our lives, whether they're your own, the kiddos we're around. But I want to invite us, these are all the same principles that apply to any of us seeking to set boundaries and empower ourselves. Near the end, in an hour or so, we'll have a section where we're also going to talk and explore a bit of that emotional and logistical challenges that come for adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse that can come up in this space. And so, as we're talking about a topic that does involve consent, childhood harm, and adult survivorship, we recognize this is a very triggering topic for some. And so, please, for one, if you're feeling those symptoms in those signs in your body that says, "Hey, this is not working for me," take care of yourself. And I'm going to actually scoot us all to the side so that we can. We've got two hotlines listed on the screen now, one for the United States and one for Canada. So if something comes up, please do what you need for yourself. Also, for our speakers, it's the same thing. If somebody has to disappear, there is no explanation ever needed. Please know this is just a good practice for your life. You don't owe people explanations when you need to step out. Okay, so while we're also talking about this topic of protecting children in our lives and navigating these complexities, it's not all fear. There's a lot of empowerment in this. And while the problem is real and pervasive, this is about equipping children to really just, frankly, I think, thrive throughout their whole lives. And so the goal of this also is to give you a starting framework on a lot of things. We're touching on a lot of topics that I think we could spend hours on each, and some of those we'll talk about for 5 to 10 minutes. So no, we will be sending out, if you did register for this, and we'll be sending out a email tomorrow or the following day with a link to a variety of resources that we discuss in this. And with that, let's go ahead and start meeting our speakers. So I'm just going to go in the order that we are on screen, which is not necessarily the order that everybody will be speaking today. But Laura, if you could just share us a little bit about whether it's what you're excited for or looking forward to tonight, and what really has you passionate to be here and share the expertise you have as a psychotherapist on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Luke and Kat. Welcome to all of the participants. Laura Farron, I am indeed a practicing therapist, but the space of complex childhood trauma is a space that I work in a lot, and I'm really excited that this conversation has been cultivated for us to model and mirror maybe what it's like to have the conversation on CSA in a very sort of safe way, so that others can get a better sense of what it sort of looks like, feels like, and sounds like. So thank you for cultivating this.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Glenn, what has you here tonight? What are you excited
Well,
about?
I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. It happened to me when I was 11 years old, and I'm here to, if I could just help one person step up today and talk about their past and get it out there, then that's worthwhile.
Yes, thank you, Glenn. I'm so glad you're all here. Stuart, let's hear from you.
Thank you. As you know, my name is Stuart. I am from the Gatehouse here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I am a survivor. I'm a long-time advocate, not just for myself, but others as well, in this of the bringing us awareness of childhood sexual abuse. But I'm also very involved in the healing side of this as well. So I'm really looking forward to talking tonight with your viewers, about some strategies about getting ready for the holidays. So thank you for having me here.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Amelia, let's turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm a registered psychotherapist, and I practice as a trauma and sex therapist in Toronto. So I work pretty much exclusively at this point with survivors of sexual violence, whether that's childhood sexual abuse, rape, trafficking, the whole spectrum. And there are not a lot of opportunities for people to come and actually listen to these topics and learn how to support themselves, how to support their families. So I'm really happy to be a part of this and to be able to share some insights on how adults can take care of themselves when they have experienced this.
Thank you so much. And Arthur, let's turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Arthur Lockhart. I'm the founder of the Gatehouse up here in Canada, Toronto, and co-founder of Survivors Council Canada and the Global Poetry Movement. And just listening to everybody, even to start us off, it just kind of feels like words from everyone here are rippling out and landing with somebody who might be just needing to hear those words right now. And so I would say to everybody speaking, thank you. Thank you for being on the planet. And to everybody who's listening in tonight, thank you for having the strength and courage to be part of this. You're helping another human being by doing this. So thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. And then Rosalia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosalia Rivera, and I'm the founder of Consent Parenting, co-founder of the Brave Movement, which is a global movement of survivors to end child sexual violence, as well as co-founder of the Survivors Council of Canada. And I'm thrilled to be talking about this because I know every year this is something I hear about from parents who really struggle with the holidays, and it's not talked about enough. So I'm really excited to have the conversation with everyone here as well as with the audience. So look forward to hearing from everyone in the chat as well.
Yes, thank you, Rosalia. And Kelly and Justine.
Hi, Justine and I are lovingly called the nurses. So we met Luke and Kat, and obviously as nurses, we work with a lot of patients who have had abuse happen to them. And so anything we can do to help bring awareness, both to people that have had this happen to them, as well as the medical community, to how to support best in that moment. So we're so excited to be part of this and really excited to learn some great things that we can help disseminate to other nurses to really educate. So thank you all for being here.
Absolutely. We definitely shared this out to our whole nursing community because there's no education like that for nurses that I feel like we really get to hear firsthand from survivors and hear really what resources are out there. I mean, we get education, but I don't think anything at this level that we're provided. And then our communities too. I feel like it's still not talked about in many communities. And so I put it out there too. So it's something that we can all start that conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I love you all. And a quick note for people who are joining in and don't know what Braving Healing is before we jump in with Laura. Braving Healing is about standing with those who've endured childhood sexual abuse and supporting the healing journey through story, knowledge, justice, and community. Tonight, I would say we largely focus on the knowledge and community aspect, which is why we're here instead of only talking about, I'll say from a standpoint, exploring consent, boundaries, and how to protect children. It is for many, or can be for many, a very powerful and healing step in their journey, which is why we have this lovely group. So we're going to get ready to transition over to Laura. So we're going to have our fun shuffle around where people start disappearing into the backstage. And we're going to be moving into a time here with Laura where we want to just ground ourselves in the topic of childhood sexual abuse, because first before we talk about like pervasiveness, this topic for many is uncomfortable, and so I'd love just Laura, as a psychotherapist, like, can you speak to people when it's just that like oh, we're talking about this almost this desire of like, do we really have to talk about this? And comfortable, like that's real and natural.
So real.
So real. So real. I sort of want to take that in a few different directions, but I think language matters. And I don't want to discount the discomfort that does exist. I really want to honor that, because that is very true. Even when there is a disclosure, it's almost like it's delivered with discomfort. But sort of shifting a little bit to the side of that, when language matters, I wonder if we can change our language to, this is just really not just, this is a very complicated and a very complex experience for many. When I think about the holidays, right? Think about the discomfort that's felt for survivors sitting at a table, maybe seeing their abuser. 91% of perpetrators are known to their victim. So talk about, yes, discomfort, honoring that, but really equally trying to shift that a little bit to, it's complicated, it's complex. But I think sort of what I sort of initially said on these, when we were introducing ourselves, these types of conversations are integral, right? To have them, to open this conversation up, to alleviate the feelings of discomfort and shame. And I think that, you know, CSA thrives in secrecy, in isolation. How do we combat that? Right? And I think it's more, and it's been alluded to, right? It's more conversations like this. So important. So important. Because to your point, Luke, that the prevalence it's pervasive, right? The 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6, these stats sometimes vary, but these are 1 in 6 boys as sexually identified. I mean, this is an unfortunate common experience, dare I say common.
Yeah. And like, as a clinical psychotherapist, like, what do you see when we, like, this shifts in people when we start to actually talk about this?
Oh, it's like expansion. It's like weight that's lifted off of them. It's a felt sort of outcome of the weight being lifted off, this sense of like, whew, I've been carrying that for so long. I've never told anyone that. I mean, that's like a profound experience. Like, I'm so grateful to be with someone in that, but to also remove sort of the shame, the criticism, the judgment, and just to be able to talk about an experience had. That's a powerful sort of, it's a powerful place to be. I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to like define what is childhood sexual abuse. Because this is something, you know, we have some easy things that can come to mind that just feel clearly.
But it's also much more broader than most people expect, including myself as a person who is victimized. So what is that spectrum, and what does it look like?
Yeah. And this is really important, because I think historically we define CSA experiences with touch, right? It was physical, it was sexual, right? But I'm actually I love this question. I have something up, because what I want to do is I want to reference the World Health Organization, and I want to do so strategically, because I think it'll start to really give maybe shape or clarity to how it's being defined. So it's the involvement of a child in sexual activity that they do not fully comprehend, are unable to give informed consent, or are not developmentally prepared for. And I think this is a key distinction, that it includes both contact and non-contact. And I'm sort of just switching back here to look at you both. And I think that latter part is really important, because when we used to look at the abuse, the definition of abuse, with the, you know, identifying it by way of physical touch, it eliminated a really big important piece around grooming. Right? So if 91% of perpetrators are known to the victims, usually this means, not in all cases, I don't want to discount experiences later in life happening, but there is a commonality with it happening at a young age. And with the known person, there's grooming, there's moments of maybe being exposed to someone's private parts. Again, not really understanding it, not really consenting to that. It could be, being given pornographic material, exposed to images. All of these things contribute to experiences of CSA.
I'm really happy that you mentioned the exposure aspect, because that for me was really hard to comprehend. Learning more about what CSA is and emotionally grappling with the fact that, oh, I was exposed to that. That is also a form of CSA. It's not talked about enough, the different forms it can show up.
I agree. And then the problem with this too is the disclosures, right? So if we don't include that, Kat, in our definitions, then we might not say, so I'm not part of that, right? Therefore, where do I go? Where then do I put this experience? Where does it get placed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so important that we've expanded upon the definition.
Glenn,
Yeah.
thanks for chiming in. You have love to hear what you have to add to this.
Oh, I was just responding to what Laura was saying, that I was showing black and white, very small pictures of men and women in sexual positions in the tent at the camping site when it was happening. So in order to get me aroused. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing it. I'm curious if feel free to pass on this question. Do you remember even on your healing journey as an adult, like when you realized, like, oh my, like, did it take you a while to recognize the full scope of like that was part of it, or did you kind of maybe think you understood that the whole time?
Oh, I didn't really realize anything until later, like into my 50s. It took a long time. It took a long time. The 18 years of psychiatric help really helped me bring to that point, right? But yeah, and then I had some EMDR in order to get rid of those pictures that I actually just saw her bring back up to me there. But it doesn't always work. It's okay. But yeah, it took a long time. It did. It took a long time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Glenn. I really, really appreciate that, because I think it's just valuable recognizing this takes so many forms, which Rosalia, you had something right in line with that to share.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to point out, Laura makes a strong point about grooming and how that's one of the tactics that's used. And I think a lot of parents tend to think that this is, especially if they're not survivors themselves, and I know some in the audience are, just parents who want to protect their children and may not recognize that this is also an issue with peers. So, cousins, older siblings or older cousins who have screen or access to devices today. We're seeing that that's one of the ways that even youth are either grooming or just using that as a way to sexually abuse, a younger cousin or sibling or peer. Sometimes it could be a step sibling. So I just want to highlight that it's also key to remember that this is also happening with others, other minors around the holidays, not just adults, because a lot of people think it's just adults.
Yeah. And Rosalia, also, it's an equally an important point of bringing in the digital. We haven't even really talked about the digital landscape, right? But that's a whole other element that I think it's important. Thank you for touching on that too. That also comes into this space and in this conversation as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really a big part of it these days.
Which is, it's scary as parents, because there's a lot to navigate, a lot to watch. Which, like, thinking about what to watch, I'd love to transition a little to talk about, like, what are signs? And I know this is not a magical at all, but like, what are some things that like might be indicators that something's happened to a child? Like, because like we see behavior changes, and parents might just be like, oh, something's gotten into my kid. When in reality there's something completely underlying that, which sometimes is that abuse. Can you share a bit of these like signs and behaviors of children who may have been assaulted or exposed to CSA?
For sure. It's such a good question. And I almost sort of think of that twofold. On the one hand, it's like maybe the way in which it will manifest itself or present itself in childhood, and then maybe what that looks like later on. So maybe sort of teenage years, adolescent years. And that's not to create a distinction between, right? So there can be pieces that might be found in both. But I think in younger ages, it could be things like night terrors, nightmares, bedwetting, thumb sucking, or the needing of comforts. Like I'm thinking about blankies, like stuffies, like really like close. Real worries about like fear-based worries around people hiding, right? Closets under the bed, not really being able to feel safe. There could be more clingy based behaviors, these types of things. And then, sort of shifting into these older years, not to say some of those wouldn't be present, but it might look like self-harm. And for the case of this discussion, it could be changes in eating behaviors, controlling eating. It could be self-harm. It could be things like picking or those types of behaviors, like harm to self, suicide attempts. It could be substance use, the numbing, the sort of escapism. It could be emotions that go from sort of 0 to 100 really quickly. And, sometimes that gets placed with, oh, there's just a new social circle of friends, or, oh, it's just, it's hormonal, it's teenage years. But it's when these things start happening together and they sort of coincide with one another, sort of a multitude of different things happening at once. A lot of seclusion, real changes and noticeable changes in behavior, these types of things. Sleep disturbances.
It's almost like perhaps is it too, I'm curious in your clinical experience, is there often is it almost like from a parent standpoint, it's paying attention to the shifts in behavior with like a different curiosity and a different versus it's just a new stage or phase?
Yes. That's why I sort of alluded to, like so many times have I heard, my parent was just chalking this up to, it's hormonal, versus asking them like, hey, I've noticed some changes. Like, are you okay? Exactly that place of curiosity. What's going on? Something's different. Are you okay? And, disclosures, I mean, I think it's 58% of disclosures happen 5+ years following the last incident, right? So there could be years of incidents, years of grooming. So it takes time. Sometimes it takes, several sort of places of curiosity and that point of asking, like, are you okay? I've noticed, these things, asking again and again. Not to the point of complete frustration where you're pushing the child away, right? It's a little sort of I don't want to say fine line, but maybe timing out some of that curiosity as well. But being curious, absolutely.
Yeah. Stuart, you had something to chime in with.
Yeah, Laura, I can really relate to a lot of what you're talking about. Even what Glenn mentioned as well. But when I look back when this all started with my abuse, and you mentioned pictures, and I thought, well, I'm looking back and reflecting. Well, this is really my gateway into, my abuse that carried on for years until I stopped it. But all the things I can totally relate to. When you talk about behaviors, I remember myself being such a bad kid in school. Well, it was probably related to what was happening to me outside school.
Yes.
And then moving further along without taking too much time here. But, and one thing here, and maybe Rosalie will touch on more on this later on, but it's identifying these signs, right? I mean, this could be another conversation in itself, but my behaviors and from the outcome of seeing that picture, which led into the abuse, my behavior was not good at all. And it's amazing how, well, I shouldn't say it's amazing, but nobody picked up on it, what I'm trying to say, right? And I guess maybe because at that time, I'm looking back in the early 60s, in the late 70s, or rather early 60s, beginning of the 70s, most parents were not educated in childhood sexual abuse. So how would you know the signs? How would you know? Why would you know your child is misbehaving in school? Maybe you don't know what's going on. Maybe these questions should have been asked. I remember them sending me to a psychologist and or a psychiatrist, And even then, they couldn't figure out what was going on with me. So again, back at that time, obviously conversation about this was never possible, right? I didn't know how to have this conversation. And even when I was asked about it, there was another story. But I don't know. I just had to chime in on this, Laura, when you talked about pictures, and maybe others could relate to that. Yeah, you show me these pictures. Here I am. I'm only at the age of 6 to 7 years of age. Like, what the hell do I know at that age? But it was part of the grooming process, right? And this is what parents need to understand and see, and then understand the signs. And again, I hope Rosalia talks more about this in her presentation later on, to help you guide that, to help your kids move forward. But I just want to throw that in there. Thank you.
Thank you. It's important. Thank you.
Laura, I have two things before I transition us out of this section. I want to first, we had a question in the comments that someone asked, how do we go about framing things if the person themselves doesn't relate to being included in this definition? So for example, someone who's exposed but does not see that as abusive. So within this context of like, what is CSA, how would you approach that?
Yeah, it's such a good, with more curiosity, which unfortunately I can't have that curiosity with this person, but I think it's also, there's a feeling to it. And I hear that all the time, right? There is this sort of instinctual sense of knowing that through the grooming process starts to get sort of, dare I say, like eradicated, removed, right? And then slowly things can just escalate and escalate. I don't want to take away the place of curiosity in the sense of, if there was sort of, and I think the example, sorry, it's gone from the screen, but the example of maybe seeing a picture between friends, but it felt safe and innocent. Yes, someone who's exposed, but not seen them as abusive. It might depend on the exposure. It might depend on a feeling. Did it feel, was I okay with it? Like, did it feel off with the other person or not? And also holding that there can be this more innocent playfulness that might happen by way of curiosity, but it's curiosity, maybe there's consent. And I know that this already feels a little bit slippery. So I want to move away from that piece, right? Because of the wanting to focus on CSA specifically. I think there's a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And without sort of being able to explore that further with this person, it's a great question. But it's a feeling, and yeah.
Amelia.
One of the things that I've noticed with a lot of the adult survivors that I work with is there's this struggle to really identify it as abuse until many, many, sometimes decades later, because part of the grooming was, this is our secret. This is a special game we play together. It wasn't, a lot of the time we think of CSA or sexual violence in general, and we hear violence and we think it must have been this big, bad, scary thing that happened. And often it's, like I said, it's games that you're playing. It's exposures that happen in this context where you feel really close, and it's the special attention that you get from this person in your life. And for those people who struggle to see it as this was abuse, it's good to offer the definition of what it was. Children can't consent, which almost immediately I find is, we're leaning towards abuse category. And just to give you that information and let it percolate in your mind. And so you can think of that and you go, did I actually have was it an appropriate relationship? Could it be that this was part of building that trust so that it could stay a secret? So that was kind of coming up to my mind, because I think a lot of this doesn't come out until quite a bit later.
That's a very good point. Rosalia.
Yeah, so I wanted to say I agree with both of you, and also just want to add that I think this also can shift the definition based on who this was happening with. So with minors, there's also the categories of sexually harmful behavior versus abuse and assault. And for a lot of adults that I've spoken with who experienced sexually harmful behavior with peers, they kind of feel the same way of like, I'm not sure if it was because it seemed consensual at the time, but I also realized afterwards that it wasn't appropriate. And so there's this feeling of like, I'm in this gray area, particularly if they weren't sure if there was like coercion either on their part or the other person's part. So I think that's a lot of times where some survivors may feel really conflicted, and particularly if they felt like they were participating instead of being, what we would typically see. And like Amelia was saying, like there's a violent aspect to it. So there's, I think, a lot of times a sort of a confusion, and then sort of a recognition later on, sometimes through therapy or through other aspects of, healing, where they come to terms with, actually, this was not appropriate behavior and there was some level of abuse. And sometimes they discover that the person who initiated it was reenacting abusive behavior that they had experienced, etc. So I think it's really tricky for the person who is trying to figure out where they fit within that spectrum. But ultimately, I agree with what you were saying also about what that feeling comes to, and just also just having the recognition of, you were a child and you didn't recognize at the time what was happening. A lot of times, since as an adult, it just can be really confusing.
I think we're starting to talk about the real complexity that exists, right? This is it. This is it.
Yes,
this is the complexity. I think. Yeah.
I'm going to transition us forward here because I could sit on this topic with all of us.
I know,
it's so hard. We're going to keep us moving here. But Laura, I wanted to touch real quick before we get out of this section is just speak to the legal responsibilities surrounding disclosure, because I think we can't talk about CSA without acknowledging that it's not just a matter of I don't feel like, or I'm not sure if I should, but there's actual laws in both Canada and the United States pertaining to this.
Yeah, look, there's some professional designations whereby it's very black and white, right? There is a disclosure. There is a duty to report. Therapists, MDs, psychologists, psychiatrists, the like, right? The teachers, there is a duty to report. I think outside of sort of those professions, I almost want to say that, maybe I'll lobby this out there. There's a moral duty to support. And that may not be reporting right away per se. That might be if you are given a disclosure to support the individual, the child, the adult, the teenager, support them on this disclosure. And whatever that looks like, if there's also then that individual who the survivor disclosed to that person, then sort of exploring, what am I now obliged to do? How do I support this person? What does this look like? But I think it's an important piece. An important piece for those outside of disciplines that are legally obliged to share, right, and report.
Yeah. Okay, Laura, thank you so much. We're going to move into a brief discussion just about what makes holidays uniquely challenging. I first want to acknowledge over here, we have a question. I'm going to punt it to later, but I just want you to know that I see your question here about how can we best protect our children, especially if they don't understand or communicate they're being abused. This is something specifically we'll be asking Rosalia about here in not too many minutes from now. So please stick around, and thank you for the question. But so looking at the holidays, part of why we wanted to talk about the holidays is because there's so much chaos. Obviously children are at risk every day of the year, but with the holidays become so many scenarios of where we have Halloween and kids are having school parties or church parties or youth organizations, or they're wearing masks and different outfits. And we have, that was just the first holiday, and then we have
there's so many things that happen during the holidays. So many events, year-round groups, whether that's a sports group, church activity, and usually the offenders are people that are closest to us, and they could be in those places where we're having the holiday parties, whether that is a sport holiday party or a church or a school. that's where a lot of the offenders are, getting close to. For example, in my instance, I did have an incident where I went to a sports party and it was a Christmas party. And unfortunately, there was an offender there, and they ended up collecting images and stuff because they had cameras in the bathroom. I would have never thought that I would be exposed to that in a party that was specifically for a sports team that I was a part of. And I think that's really hard that just parents may not be aware of that can happen, that they could be exposed to that in those environments. And I know Rosalia also talked about cell phones and technology and that being exposed, because it's not just adults, it's also kids were around, and knowing that there's so much technology around us and what can be exposed to each other with, that's also another layer of complexities mixing into the holidays.
Plus, we have kids, we have fall breaks, Thanksgiving breaks, Christmas breaks, depending if you have other, depending on your religion, you might have other breaks coming up. We're in a holiday, like for all many different religions, we have a lot of holidays happening right now. And so kids spend more time on their phone, which just create more windows of opportunity. Can you just speak a little more about like the expectations that come with the holidays on kids?
On kids? Oh yeah. I think one of the biggest ones is give grandma or grandpa a hug. Not knowing that you have autonomy to say no or what boundaries are. I think that is a really hard, especially if you're not taught. That can be a hard one to meet with, because I was often grown up with, oh, it's your brother, go give him a hug. I wasn't asked, oh, would you like a hug? I wasn't able to have that. I could decline that if I wanted to, because of the culture that I was raised in. And I think that's one layer of complexity I noticed, at least during the holidays for myself, that I have experienced.
And I think too, when we talk about like what makes holidays uniquely challenging, and I can't remember who alluded to it already, but it's I think it was you, Laura. But once we move into this holiday season, because so many instances of CSA harm are with somebody they know, which puts us more likely to be a family or close friend who would be invited into these gatherings that we're moving into, which then increases the likelihood that a child who's already been harmed is going to be put in spaces with the person who committed the harm. And so I just want to first, I also want to like offer parents as a parent, a bit also like we're moving into this season. It's like there's this fear that's real, but there's also like as parents, the steps we can take, and Rosalie is about to give us a lot of this, but there's also, we have to recognize like we're human, and I think there's like this uncomfortable. I'm finding myself even uncomfortable saying in this space, but there's like we have to give ourselves grace and do everything we can. But realizing like we can't protect our children from all forms of harm, but what we can do, which alludes to, actually we have a question here of like, how do we give kids age appropriate tools, which I'm really grateful for that question, because that's exactly where we're about to go. But giving kids tools, we're setting them up to be more likely, more equipped to be able to share what's wrong, express that something happened, should something happen.
Right. I think education is really important for this, because then kids can identify what the harm is, how to talk about it, consent. When they're taught these things, they can better show up to themselves when the parents are present, which I think is honestly really empowering for the child, but also a difficult situation to face as a parent.
Yeah. Amelia.
Definitely. So I want to echo what you were saying previously about just recognizing that you're human, because I think especially attending a webinar like this, and you hear all the potential warning signs and all the situations in which this could happen, the anxiety is going to start to peak, right? And so just recognizing you're not going to pick up on everything always, and you just need to do the best that you can, right? Take those moments, try to approach it with curiosity. And as long as you are allowing yourself to do that. You're not burying your head in the sand, right? You're trying as much as you can to look for some of those signs. You're having some of these conversations. Then you are doing more than a lot of people have already done. You're doing the things you need to do. I think this is going to get touched on a little bit later, so I don't want to go too much into it, but I'm just thinking, like, we can't expect our children to open up to us if we haven't set the conditions to actually open up. So if you're not asking certain questions or having conversations about what is appropriate or what isn't, or if sex in general is a topic that you shy away from consistently, it's going to be really hard for someone who's little to bring that up. So I'd say maybe that can help with, create some of those opportunities, but give yourself a little bit of grace. This is really difficult stuff to be navigating.
Yes, thank you so much, Amelia. I think it's just it's a hard topic, and I want to roll us into our discussion with Rosalia, but want to acknowledge just Jenna, Jen. I'm not even going to try to figure out if that's a middle initial or if your name, full first name, but. Here we have a comment from YouTube. I just want to say thank you to all of the speakers who are using more nuanced language and not just survivor, because a lot of the people I work with do not resonate with that word, which I that's even, like, you'll notice in a lot of our stuff we've switched to using people who have endured, because we've tried to sidestep the whole language conversation, because it is.
Everyone identifies so differently. Like, I personally identify with victim because I don't believe parts of me survived the experiences I went through, and everyone has their own identification when it comes to that and their lived experience, and we also want to honor that as well.
Okay, so we're going to roll into talking about protecting the children around us with Rosalia. So first, I want to first talk about, for people who endured childhood sexual abuse, when we move into the parenting space, and there's this struggle of, like, how do I protect my children in ways that I wasn't, and this then can evoke feelings of guilt, hypervigilance, fear. So at first, before we dive into the strategies and start to talk about the specifics, could you just speak to that experience for adults who have endured this harm that are now faced with protecting their children?
I'm so glad that you started at that place, because it is something that most people don't even recognize as the predominant challenge, is recognizing that you weren't given the ability to have a voice, to have autonomy, like Kat was saying, and to be able to vocalize those boundaries. And when we are, particularly if it was someone who was within the family, you kind of go backwards in time to the younger person that you were when something happened to you. And it makes it that much more challenging to own your voice. And then that much more challenging to then teach your child how to do it. And so you're really juggling so many things. So I think Amelia's point was really spot on, because these are all the things we're juggling with beyond just the tactical, what do I teach my kids, how do I protect them, etc. So I want to honor those who had experienced something and are trying to move into the space of education. They recognize that it's necessary, they want to do what's right to protect their kids. And through that, it can be a really triggering experience. So I think it's important to just acknowledge that, recognize it, and give yourself grace, like Amelia was saying, because otherwise you beat yourself up, and that actually just impedes the whole process. So I think it's an important starting point, is to recognize I'm just going to do the best that I can with the information that I have. And every year and every holiday season, it can get better and better and better. And to know that this is a process. It doesn't have to happen overnight.
Yeah, thank you. I want to take one more stop before we get into some of the tactics, because I think we've already alluded to this earlier, but it's how harm doers build trust with children and families, what grooming looks like. I want to just make sure we talk about that, because I think, and I know you've spoken to this in the past, and when we interviewed you, but about this idea of, like, people groom not just the person they end up harming directly, but the people around them, and sometimes even so much as many would say the community at large. So I'd like, I'll just leave it at that. But that's a huge. I'll let you take it from where you want with that. But then I've got a couple follow-up questions depending on where we go.
Yes, it's one of the points that I think most adults don't recognize when it comes to grooming. They think, the person's just grooming the child and then the child falls prey. But that's actually the second stage of it. The first stage is targeting the adults who are the gatekeepers. And how do you get access to a child if not by that gatekeeper? So it starts with, grooming the adult who gives access, but also to grooming the people around that adult. Because if that adult gets suspicious and they talk to someone else about it, then they want the other people around that adult to dismiss it, to gaslight that person, to make them think, oh, but that person's so nice. And, that's an award-winning teacher, or, that coach has been so great to all the kids. And so you as a parent might go, okay, maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe I'm, making too much of it. Maybe I'm seeing things. And so they will go out of their way, particularly if they are someone who is targeting multiple children or is a serial offender. They are definitely going to go out of their way to make themselves appear as, this wholesome, wonderful, helpful, adult who is just great with kids and, is just such a kind person. Like, how could you think that of someone? So they are definitely working to groom the people around that adult, but also directly the gatekeeper, right? That adult who has the access to the child. And a lot of times, particularly around the holiday season, this might be something that it sort of initiates the relationship. It might be, oh, I gave them this wonderful gift, and now there's this point of connection that continues past the holidays. So it's an important thing to be aware of, and it's important to learn about the signs of grooming so that you can be on the lookout for it. And if you do spot it, you can intervene before the grooming escalates, which is part of this, the stages of abuse.
I want to take a quick moment. If Kelly and Justine, can you also just throw Rosalia's website on the screen for folks? Because if for anybody listening, you're thinking, man, like I want, because we're going to give you this brief bit of Rosalia's knowledge, but over at consentparenting.com, you have a lot on there. And I'm basically briefly inserting an ad for you in the sense that I just want to highlight that, like, you have courses, you have free articles. Do you still do your podcast? I can't remember if
I put a bit of a pause on the podcast, but I do have lots of resources, and there is actually a PDF download that you can get for free on the 10 signs of grooming. That one's particularly for signs to see if your child is being groomed. But there's also a really great podcast that I did with the author of Duck Duck Groom, who wrote about this topic of, how adults are groomed as well, and goes deeper into the subject. So highly recommend listening to that if you want to learn more about grooming. But thank you for putting my website up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I just feel bad that I haven't remembered it each time with each person. But we'll circle back on those things. So, is there just a quick, and I know none of these are quick thoughts, but are there particular things when people are looking in the mirror who want to be like, what makes me or my child more vulnerable to grooming? What would you say to the person who's wondering that question?
Yeah, I hate answering this because unfortunately, they're already vulnerable people, and this is what makes them more targetable in a sense. So if we're talking about parents who are single parents because they need additional support in multiple ways. So this could be, help with childcare, help with finances, or help with anything else, that someone could be helpful with when you're a single parent. And, first of all, just incredible respect for parents who are solo parenting, co-parenting, single parenting, because it is not an easy job to do on your own. And so, you think of the idea of it takes a village, right? And when you're a single parent, you need that village. So it makes it that much more challenging to think, well, who can I trust then if that village could be filled with people who are unsafe? And so that's why it's important to recognize what grooming is so that you can spot it, and you can recognize when someone is doing something beyond what would be appropriate in terms of helping. So I don't want parents who are single parents to decline help because of that. I think it's important to have that village. So I just wanted to say that. But also children who, if someone sees that a child is being neglected in some way, maybe there is a parental figure that's missing, they will step in to try to fill that role. There's also children who have perhaps a disability of some kind. Maybe they're nonverbal, maybe there's developmental delays, etc. So those are also vulnerable children. Unfortunately, LGBTQ youth are also targeted because of multiple reasons, including that maybe they don't feel like they have a trusted adult in the home that they can talk to about those things, and that makes them a target because an offender can see that that child needs someone to talk to, and they can be that person and take advantage of that situation. Unfortunately, also families that are religious and are not talking about sexual health issues or topics, they're not being educated in the home. Of course, children who are not being educated about body safety education, they're lacking that information, whether it's in the home or at school or any other resource. There's also children who are just from communities that are marginalized, where this could be Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, where there might be a higher prevalence of this to start with for multiple reasons. In Canada, as an example, there are children who have experienced generational abuse because of residential schools, and it's just continued on within those communities unchecked and without resources to combat the issue. So marginalized communities are also, at higher risk for being targeted. So those are the different groups predominantly that are seeing it at higher rates, but that also doesn't mean that communities where there is affluence are not affected. So I don't want people to think, oh, I'm not in one of those categories, therefore I'm safe. Let's dismiss that too, because there are, one of the things, as an example, that I just recently was having an interview with someone who's in the tech space, and they said that offenders online are actually targeting kids who are really well off, and they're either wealthy or they are doing really well academically because they have a lot to lose. And they know that they can target them because, this is a kid who's really doing well. They've got everything going for them. And so if they are sextorted, they know they have a lot to lose, and they can really attack that child. So it is really the full spectrum, sadly. And unfortunately, because of the way that offenders in communities are talking to each other and trading information on how to get away with these things and how to target kids, there's so much more sophisticated information. So I just don't want anyone to think, if I'm not in that group, then not my kid, Yeah.
No, and so let's start talking about how we equip our kids with body safety. I want to start by, why is it important to teach children proper anatomical terms without shame? And first I want to share, I have a friend who spent many years as a sex crimes prosecutor, and she shared with me that every single one of the children that were victims that she prosecuted on behalf the perpetrators did not have anatomical language for the parts of their body that were being sexually abused. And so I think like that really stood out in my mind. So why is that so important here?
Well, first of all, there's two main reasons. One is body literacy is just important to teach kids so that they understand their bodies, just out of a basic human right to understand your body. I think it's important. And to be able to teach it in a way that doesn't shame the body. So just having a child be able to name their body parts, just like an elbow or an ear, is really important just from a body literacy standpoint. But secondly, and because of not having that shame, a child can call it what it is, which is important in terms of body safety, because if they are being touched inappropriately, they can actually name it. And that's actually really important in a court of law, especially if they are testifying, if they're giving testimony in, with law enforcement, they need to be able to say, this is where I was touched, with clarity. And particularly if a child is really young, because unfortunately, I've seen so many cases, like you said, they didn't have that language to be able to say what happened. Also, moving away from euphemisms, because unfortunately, if someone is, saying, oh, they touched my cookie, then nobody's going to understand that was abusive behavior that was happening. They may dismiss it. And that's happened so many times, where a child went and told the teacher, and the teacher didn't understand what they were talking about. And the child was actually trying to disclose where someone touched them inappropriately. So those are the two main principal reasons why it's so important. And it just helps to strengthen the child's recognition of, their body, what body boundaries are, understanding the concept of autonomy when you start getting into that. So it's just part of that really basic education that all kids need.
Yeah. It feels like a feeling to protect a kid's innocence gets in the way of then teaching them what can protect them, because they culturally, I know, especially growing up, it was like, oh, we don't talk about this, or we are going to use a different word for that to protect a perceived innocence, versus the education I and many other kids would probably need is like, no, that is what that body part is.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very interesting how that cultural nuance has affected this as well.
Yeah, and I think when people say that, what I always say is, actually the one thing that would take away a child's innocence is abuse. And so this is actually a protective measure for that. And secondly, I think it's a way to move away from taboos. So the way that you can explain private parts to kids in terms of using anatomical words is to say, these are doctor words. For a really young child, you can say, these are doctor words, right? These are words that the doctor uses, just like they would with your eyeball. And, as your child gets older, you can be more nuanced. So initially you want to just teach vagina, vulva, penis. Whereas when the child gets older, you can go into more detail about their anatomy. And when we normalize this as these are just body parts, there's no shame, connected to them, then it's easier for the child to also be able to talk about it when, if something happens. Hopefully nothing ever does. But then once your child gets older and those conversations around sexual health begin, it's not awkward. And both of you have adjusted to being able to use these words without shame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how do we figure out what are age appropriate conversations around body autonomy? Because there's a drastic difference from talking to a 3-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely. So the good news is today there are so many more resources available. There are sexual health standards of what is age appropriate. I know that when I was growing up, my mom couldn't even say the word sex. Like, it was not, like, that word was off the table. It was whispered, in the background. Whereas today we know that there's different tools that we can use to talk about this. So if you grew up in a household where it wasn't discussed, it might still feel awkward to you, but there's really great tools like books that we can use. Amaze.org is a really great resource also as well online that helps, with information for parents. So learning about it through educational books. There's sexual health educators. Melissa Carnegie is also one of my favorites from Sex Positive Parents. And they, outline, here's what's age appropriate at these ages and stages. Here's where you can start to, it really is combined with child development understanding and psychology, and really understanding brain development, right? So once we started to educate ourselves with the tools that are available today, it makes it a lot easier to be able to pass that on to our kids. And I want to also say, for a lot of parents, like, they're learning this for the first time too. And so have grace, with yourself. If you're like, this is making me uncomfortable, but I have to power through this. Like, again, you don't have to do this overnight. baby steps are okay as long as you're moving in that direction continuously.
One of the pieces of advice someone gave me years ago was like, if you you have a kid who asks a question, and it's like my 5-year-old, I was pulling into a rest stop and pull in and literally hit park on the van, and I hear from the back seat, "How do babies get in mommy's bellies?" And I was just like, who knows where I was? I was not thinking about that. But I love somebody who was like, you just like, you can start sharing stuff that's age appropriate, but then when the kid shows that they're no longer interested, you just move on. And as a 5-year-old, she only has so long, and that was really helpful for me because I was like, you know what? I have a book at home. We're gonna sit down and we're gonna read when we get home. So I've been ready for this book, and we'll read it together. And we sat down, and after 10 pages, she was like, I'm bored now. And it's like, but I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think when kids are asking those conversations, they're basically handing you like a special card that says, I'm ready to like hear about this. And, just like you said, you can gauge their interest by just giving them a little bit, asking them some questions. A lot of times it does start with that. Kids, particularly toddlers, they're actually around a lot of pregnant people because they're at that age where sometimes there's a sibling, that's, being grown. And other times, they're around step siblings, or people who are pregnant, right? So it's a time where they're typically asking, and it's a great time for you to start those conversations. Other times it's because a kid heard something in the playground and they're coming home and they're like, what does this mean? And you're like, oh my God, I wasn't ready for that, right? So that's okay too. And you don't have to like explain the whole thing. You can just say, oh, where did you hear that? And what did you hear that means? And then if you're not ready in that moment, you're like, let's have this conversation a little bit later when I can sit down with you. And then you can prepare yourself for like, how do I explain this, right? And again, there's so many great resources to help you do that. So take your time and know that if you need to take a breath and take a minute, that's also fine. Depending on the age and stage of your child, you'll have resources available. And the good news is there are so many more today compared to like even 10 years ago.
Yeah, so let's talk about checking in before and after events. Like, what's that look like? Because I'm thinking, so like maybe whether it's a holiday gathering, a school party, and maybe you won't be present. When we're thinking about, like these conversations with the kids, how do you have what's a check-in before and afterward look like?
Yeah, so this is a really great question, but I also want to preface it by saying that it's not just with kids that we need to have these conversations. So we tend to put a lot of the responsibility and the onus of kids protecting themselves by teaching just kids about these topics. And it's really important that we recognize, especially the younger our kids are, and when we're just starting to teach them about how to set a boundary and about body safety, that our responsibility is actually to talk to the adults in our kids' lives first and foremost, because they're just little and they can't really, even if they set a boundary, it doesn't mean it's always going to be respected. And we need to be their advocates and we need to be their safeguards first. So when you know that you're going to be going to a family get together where Aunt, Beth is super huggy, and that you've been starting to teach your child about body safety, this is a really great time to reach out to Aunt Beth and be like, hey, just want to let you know we're teaching body safety. We are teaching them that, they don't have to hug everybody. So I know you haven't seen them in a while and you might want to hug from them, but we are teaching our kids that they're allowed to do a different kind of greeting. So if they want to wave, if they want to do a high five, a fist bump, an elbow, like there's lots of choices. So we just want to let you know ahead of time. And then you're also going to teach your child, hey, you haven't seen Aunt Beth. She probably wants a hug. But, just remember your body belongs to you. You don't have to do the hug. Remember the other options that you have if you want to just wave. You can also make it fun too, right? Like we can make our own traditions. So you might want to do like a holiday dance to get together. I've even heard of people doing I don't know if you've ever seen this where teachers do like a sign of like different ways that you can greet your teacher. And there's a little poster at the door. So as, the kids are lining up coming in, they can do like a high five or a fist bump. So they point to like what they want. You can do something similar at the family gathering and just be like, hey, we're doing this new tradition because you get to choose how you want to greet, right? And so the child can point to it or the adult can point to it and say, hey, we're doing this new tradition. So there's ways that we don't have to make this awkward. We can, change it up in really creative ways, that we can make it fun for everybody, that we can highlight that we're doing something new and different. So get creative with it and try to communicate to as many people as possible. Sometimes I even recommend that, if you're the one hosting, you can send this out as part of your invitation to say hey, FYI, this is what we're doing. We're practicing body safety. A lot of times that's an icebreaker conversation. And then you're going to have Aunt Beth coming over and being like, what's with this new thing? And it's great opportunity for you to go, hey, yeah, we're just learning about body safety because we've just been learning about how prevalent CSA is. And this is a really great way for us to empower our kids. And we love that you're willing to participate with this and help our child be safe and be one of those safe people in their lives. So we're calling them in instead of making it feel like we're calling them out. So I really am a strong advocate for communicating with the adults as well as with our kids for what those greeting options are. And that includes everything from tickling to sitting on laps to all the things, right? We can really empower our kids and to have a safety word to say if you feel uncomfortable about something, come over and let's use our safety word. That could be coconut or oranges or whatever it is that bumblebee, whatever it is that you guys come up with, and then something's going on. You can keep tabs on it, particularly if that there is a adult who makes you uncomfortable or makes your child uncomfortable, or you need to keep an eye on because you're getting weird vibes. Then you can prepare them in advance with those kinds of things.
One of the things I've started doing in recent years at family things, especially with my nieces and nephews, is offering them as everybody's saying goodbye, and that's when it's everybody starts to go to hugs. I'll squat down and be like, do you want a hug, high five, or fist bump? And which sometimes they'll even say none, and I'm like, that's fine. But it's intentionally de-escalating in physical contact. So the last one, it's not building up so then hugs the last one. That it's just. And I have nieces and nephews. They're they'll just put their little hand up, and we just do a little bump. And it's kind of for me, it's been that space. One, I give my kids that option, but it's also kind of just setting that tone. Uncle Luke doesn't deserve anything in this space, and it's kind of it's been my way of trying to share that with any kid around.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's helpful for adults, if you want to dive deeper with any particular adult that is coming over, you can dive deeper into those things. I've even heard of things where they have the mistletoe, which I've never liked because it's sort of forcing a kiss, to change it to something like a high five holly. And, instead, when you're under the mistletoe, you can switch it up and actually say, oh, actually, it's a high five holly for us, and change it up. So, to me, it's about just having different options, talking to the adults about, here's all the different ways, and talking to the kids, too. Even if it's not your own child that's coming over, you can talk to them like you did just now. You get down and you're here's, how about this as all of these options, right? For some kids, if they've never done it, they're like, what? It's kind of, weird, but it makes them also recognize oh, somebody isn't just forcing it. And that might be their first introduction to boundaries, right? So a lot of times we don't realize that we're teaching just by example and how we're modeling it. And also the way that we set boundaries with other adults, the way that our kids are seeing that is also teaching them indirectly.
So how do we help kids understand safe, unsafe, and confusing touch? I know that's a huge, all these, every single question I have is a massive one, but from this point of for somebody who's just you know what, I don't even know where to start. Where do you help a parent who doesn't understand how to talk to their kids about this?
So if you're talking about right before the holidays, you're I need to do a crash course because I've never really talked to my kids about this, and we always want to start from a place of empowerment and not fear, because we can dive into this and just create fear because they're oh my God, all of a sudden this conversation and even the energy that we bring to the conversation is going to impact our kids. So I think regardless of whether it's a crash course or not, it's important to start with the fact that we need to teach kids that their body belongs to them. So those are the foundation of body safety really needs to start with consent education, which is your body belongs to you. That's autonomy. You have the right to decide how you want, people to interact with your body, right? And that's how you set your boundaries. So it's helping kids understand that they have a body bubble, that they have the ability to, say, and this goes with other kids too, right? Like this can be just the same as like, you don't want your cousin to like just come in and hug you, or you don't like when your cousin just, pulls on your hair or like taps you on the head, or, someone pinches you on the cheek. Like there's so many ways where kids, recognize like, I don't like those things. And so that can still be considered unsafe touch because someone crossed a boundary without asking. And so we just want to help kids understand whatever it is, that if it's a touch that makes you feel uncomfortable, it makes you feel unsafe, then that's unsafe. We want to move away from language of like good touch and bad touch, because we know that for kids, being touched in private areas can actually feel good because there's the most concentrated number of nerve endings in that area. So unfortunately, sometimes a kid can get tricked into, touch in that area and not recognize it as bad touch, especially if they've been told that's bad touch, but they're like, but that kind of felt good. So it can be really confusing, and it can make the child feel like, somehow there's something wrong with them, right? For not feeling like it was a bad touch. So it's important to stick to that language, safe and unsafe. What I would say is once you have established body autonomy, your body belongs to you, you have a right to your boundaries. No one should, go in for a hug or a kiss or a tickle without asking permission. You've set the foundation for, consent. And we don't have to use that term. We can just say, permission, or you can say, somebody has to ask you, depending on the age of your child, to use language that's really simple and makes sense for them. But as your child gets older, you can remind them, like, you get to choose. Autonomy does get unlocked at different ages. That's another part of it. Like, so kids can't consent to certain things. Like, even if your cousins are tickling you and it feels good, like, you still can't, like, that's still not okay, and it's still unsafe. And so you need to, tell them, hey, that's a private part. That's not okay to touch. So this is where we want to now teach about private parts and what parts are okay for anyone to touch and not okay for anyone to touch, regardless of whether you like it or not. Because of that, understanding that it might feel good. So we want to make sure that kids understand, certain things kids can't say okay to. And so you then move into teaching about private part safety. I always remind parents to teach that even the mouth is considered a private part. If you are someone who is still uncomfortable with, using anatomically correct language because of maybe your own upbringing or whatever, you can still say, the parts covered by your swim, your bathing suit, if you're not there yet, but it's still important to teach it, at least in some way, shape, or form. So teaching kids about, how it's okay for, maybe an adult to help, like if you're still potty training or you're still diapering, who is allowed to help with that and who is not, and what it should feel like, how fast it should go, so that if someone's lingering or someone's touching in a different way that, is beyond what hygiene, feels like or looks like, then the child can recognize like that didn't feel right. So you want to start with some of those basics, right, without getting too far deep into it. But those are the main points that you want to strike. And then you want to make sure that you're also adding that if something feels off, if someone, did something, even if it seemed innocent, even if it seemed like a tickle, but it made you feel weird, let me know, talk to me. We want to stay away from like, then that person is going to be in trouble, or, kids are really loyal to the people that abuse them, unfortunately, because it is typically someone that they know, love and trust, or like and trust. So you want to make sure that they are feeling safe to tell you, not because that person's going to get in trouble, but because then they can help keep them safe. So language that you want to use is, this way I can make sure that, you're not in trouble, and you'll never be in trouble for telling me. So that's another really important piece, is to remind kids they're never going to be in trouble for telling. It's a brave thing to tell, because sometimes, they'll get threatened, whether it's by a peer or an adult. So letting them know you're never going to be in trouble. I will always believe you. You can come to me and I'll make sure that you're safe. So important to always wrap it with that.
just want to share just for people listening, from a personal experience. It's very anecdotal. I'm not an expert on consent and raising children in this, but we introduced the kids very early on to anatomically correct language, and it's been interesting. I remember even like as little as like 5 years old, asking my oldest, like, oh, when you were at so and so's house, did anybody touch your labia? But we answered it in the middle of a conversation. We're just talking about this. No, and then we just keep going. And so now, like, talking about, now she's 12, and the body is a body that has all different kinds of names for different parts. And so anecdotally speaking, I know for people who are like, I feel so uncomfortable, same. I did have a nurse for mom, so we weren't completely in the dark about the body, but I was pretty darn close in the dark about the body. And so I just think from my own personal experience, I've been able to watch my children have a completely different process and relationship to their own body, because we just talk about it. It's a thing that we all have, and but we can also, who touches it, how we treat it, where do we expose it, because my youngest sometimes needs reminding that clothes need to stay on, but it's but also not shaming for the clothes anyway. So those are just, but I just wanted to share that I've seen a lot of beauty in my own kids being able to be raised around not
Yeah. And I think for, as someone myself, as a survivor, like raising my kids similarly to the way that you're sharing, it can be a healing process, knowing that you're helping to break the cycles of taboos and stigmas and shame, and to really empower your children to understand their bodies and understand their rights, and to be able to access help and know that they have an advocate. So those are all things that I'm hoping, that they will pass on to their kids. And like, how amazing that we're raising a generation of children that can become adults who are going to be safe for other people, as well as being able to know how to keep themselves safe.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one question before I transition us out of this section.
Or do we want the YouTube questions?
Well, that's what I wanted.
Okay.
There's one I really liked on here, if this is the right one. Yeah, so it's, what can we do at home to ensure kids have the appropriate tools aside from being curious and or teaching consent? Because you've talked a lot about consent, and you've also talked about some of these peripheral things. But I felt like this was a better question than me asking you, like, what do you want to make sure we touch on before we get out of here? Because this really drives it home. Like, so for the parent who's like, I'm teaching my kid consent, and I'm curious about what they're hearing at the playground, but what else can I do?
Yeah, I mean, we want to make sure, again, in terms of what we can do at home, it's really about finding opportunities for conversations that aren't all centered just around private part safety or just around consent, that they are also centered around connection and open communication and creating a safe space. So I think a lot of times parents don't realize that they're setting their kids up to fear consequences. And so you may say to your child, like, you can come and tell me anything and you won't be in trouble, but then they see that they're getting in trouble for these other things. So a lot of it, I think, has to do also with the way that we communicate, even just in our parenting. Like, okay, is my parent going to get mad because I made a mistake, or are they, and are they going to punish me in a specific way? Or do they tend to recognize that I made a mistake? And yes, they may get upset, but ultimately they want to help me through that mistake instead of just punishing me. Like, these are sort of subtext messages that we're giving through our parenting. So I think a lot of the ways that we can actually really help our kids be safe is by focusing on those parenting styles that can really create more openness and connection with our kids. When our kids really do feel genuinely safe to talk to us about anything, is when they are more likely to be able to come and tell us if something even just like felt a little bit off, right? When we talk about things like secret safety, creating secret safety rules in our home, those won't work if our kids are afraid to actually tell us that they made a mistake and actually did keep a secret, right? Because kids will make mistakes. We know that, they have higher risk, instincts, and that's not the right word, but I'm looking for, but they have higher impulses to take risks, right? And so they're going to make mistakes. And they may keep a secret even when they know they shouldn't. So it's important for them to feel safe to come to us. So even when we're teaching these peripheral things of body safety, like secret safety, like exit strategies, another example of this would be, I just saw a comment here about empower children with body autonomy and boundaries, teach, no, go, tell. I think that's that can be helpful, but not all kids do that, right? Sometimes it's important to recognize that the body may freeze, right? As a nervous system response, a child may know to do these things, and yet they still freeze. So even talking to kids about things like that and saying, you may know all of these things, and in the moment, if you freeze and you can't run away and you can't go and tell somebody right away, know that that wasn't your fault. And sometimes that's how the body reacts, and it's okay. You can still come and tell me it's not your fault. So we need to also recognize those things. And again, if we create a safe space, our kids will feel safe to come and tell us, like, I wasn't able to do the thing, or I wasn't able to say no in that moment. I don't know why that happened, but so creating that safe space, I think, is like the big foundation to all of these other pieces working, to actually help, a child get out of a situation or not even get into it in the first place. If they have, if they learn to listen to their intuition, as a peripheral body safety piece, then when they recognize, like, hey, I was able to listen to my gut and something, and then I can come and tell my mom, then you as the parent can go, oh my gosh, I also had that instinct about that person. Now we can intervene and not, and actually prevent you from spending time with that person because we both felt something. And so let's step in and do something about it. Right.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to wrap us up on this section, even though I have a few more questions, but because I suspect we could talk all night, Rosalia. So thank you so much. We're going to shift over to exploring the adult survivor aspect of moving into the holidays, which I also want. So if anybody on here who's like, I'm not a survivor, but I'm, what I want to invite you into is this discussion we're about to have with Amelia. Is going to be valuable just for understanding people around you, for understanding it. And it might not always be childhood sexual abuse, but it could just be them responding from a different source of trauma. But this recognizing how people show up and the complexities that they have might help you make sense of some of the loved ones around you. And so even if you're not a CSA survivor, I think this is really, really valuable space. So Amelia, let's see. I will slide you in here. Hey, okay. So Amelia, let's first, we just talked with Rosalia about, working with kids and this different stuff, but like as adults, especially with the adult CSA survivor lens, how do we set boundaries? It's a really uncomfortable, for many, it's a very difficult, psychologically complex.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
I still struggle with it, setting boundaries and feeling comfortable setting those boundaries.
Yeah. And I think regardless of whether you endured a CSA early on in life or not, it's hard to set boundaries. We're kind of people pleasers. We're almost conditioned to be people pleasers, and often, especially when it comes to our families and when it comes to our holidays. And it could be really hard to actually reflect on what it is that you need and what will make you feel safe and comfortable going into this season. And then putting that fence around you and making sure that you keep people from crossing it. So I think it's difficult for anybody. And if you've experienced CSA, it could be even more difficult because there's just a lot of layers. And as we've been talking about it all night, it's complex.
So how do we say no? How do we find that, like, when we're finding that moment, we're like, I want to say no. How do we, like, what are strategies for whether that's grounding ourselves or maybe the preparation work to know, like, we're going into a holiday space? Maybe it's doing the work of, like, what do I want to make sure I say no to today? Or how would you encourage someone to explore that?
Yeah, so I could give you tips for in the moment to help you, but I really think what will be the most effective is if you start from long before you even say no, to figuring out what it is that you want to say no to and why you want to say no to it. Because later on, when you're getting pushback or you're looking at somebody when you've said no and you're seeing the disappointment on their face, it could be really difficult to maintain that no when you don't have this really well-defined reasoning for why you're actually saying that no. And so that could be for anything. It could be whether you actually want to attend a holiday gathering or not, whether you want to have certain boundaries around you when you do attend, right? Because sometimes it can feel, you know, with a lot of the people I work with, it's now this recognition that they have experienced this and not wanting to be around family, or feeling like because they found this out, they have to not be around family. So it's almost like if I go, I'm letting myself down, but it's not necessarily a decision they want to make. It feels like the decision they have to make because of conditioning or what they think is, you know, we see recovery often in black and white, all or nothing terms. And if you sit down, the first go-to that I have is make a pros and cons. And I know this sounds super basic and you might be rolling your eyes at the idea of it, but how many times have you actually sat down and gone, what are the benefits of doing this thing? What are the consequences of doing this thing? And then on my pros and cons are like a chart of 4. And what are the benefits of not doing this thing? And what are the benefits of not doing this thing? So you have it from all the angles. And then you sit with the consequences. Which weighs more for me? And if it really is I definitely don't want to go, as an example, then now you know exactly what consequences you don't want to sit with, which ones weigh heavier than the consequences. Oh, I'm getting lost here. I always get lost when I talk about this part, but which one weighs heavier, right? And then that's in your back pocket. So when you do decide, I am going to say no to this, you're able to think back to all that reasoning, and it gives you the confidence to be able to remain firm. So I'd say that's one. Like, really do that inner digging of, why is it important for me to say no, or why is it important for me to say yes to this, right? Yeah. Shall I keep going with what you can do in the moment, or is there another?
Well, you said that was the first, so I was expecting a second. Where do you want to go?
So let me keep going with it. So that's number 1, really figuring it out. Also, don't feel like you have to do it in the moment, right? Like, you get an invite, you don't have to in that instance respond. Give yourself a little bit of time. Allow yourself to self-reflect. If you say one thing, you can also change it later on. Sometimes it feels like, we already agreed to doing this thing. So if I say no now, or if I change my opinion, or if I say I can't come for the whole event, or if I say that I really don't want to have a celebration with this person here, that it's just going to explode and it's going to be a horrible situation. It might be. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? People do not like it when we set boundaries if we've never set them before. But will it be worse for you to sit through it knowing that you didn't do it, right? So having that in the back of your mind can also be helpful. You're allowed to say, you're allowed to take your time. You're allowed to change your mind and prepare yourself for if it doesn't go well. It is very rare that I work with folks where they go, I said no, and everybody said great. Sometimes it's, I said no, and there was pushback, right? And I don't want it to sound negative, because the victory in it is actually the fact that you were able to stand up for yourself.
I love the change your mind, because you and I discuss that a lot. Like, I'll say one thing and be like, you know what, I changed my mind on this, or how I want to approach this. I think that's just very valuable to hear as well.
Also, like at the very beginning, you know, when it's like, oh my gosh, I want to say no to this, but I don't have a well-defined reasoning, and then feeling like you have to have a really good articulate reason, or else like you should be saying yes, which is like, just yesterday we were at the grocery store and we were at the checkout, and a guy comes over to me and asks if he could use our cart if we were done with it, as we're about to put the groceries in and wheel it out to the car. We didn't have a lot of groceries, but I almost said yes, even though I didn't. And I thought about the fact that I'm like, I have chronic hand issues. I need this. And I said no, and I saw this little look on the guy's face that was just kind of like a, you know, and I'm a healthy looking 35-year-old male that's like, and I thought, like, I started just, explaining to her, even though the guy had left, like, why, and she said something like, why, you don't even need an explanation. And it's just this like being able to say no to anything, whether it's tiny or big, and not have to be able to articulate that to justify it.
There's a lot of confidence in knowing your own reasoning
Mm-hmm.
and then sticking by that, and also saying no, and not having to necessarily articulate that reasoning to the other person.
Yeah.
Totally.
Laura.
It's like I'm coming in after a little bit late, but I think no is a complete sentence, right?
Yes.
So it does not need explanation. It is no, period. So I think you're sort of touching on that, but it's a powerful stance.
Yes. Yes.
Which can feel so uncomfortable because after we say no, it feels like we should say something else. We've been conditioned to give that explanation.
Right. It feels like a need, like you're like,
So replace that with a breath. No.
Yeah.
Right? Pull it with a breath. Yeah. I heard this quote at one point. It was years ago. I have no idea. I can't remember who to quote it. So I'm definitely not taking credit for it. But it was around boundaries. And it was stop setting yourself on fire to keep somebody else warm. And I think that it could be so powerful because even if you think about the example you just gave of you've got a wrist thing, you could really benefit from having the cart there. This other person would benefit from being able to take the cart. But why would it be that that person's discomfort is actually more important than your discomfort in that moment?
Yeah.
So creating those shifts for yourself, it could be really uncomfortable to tell the family that we've got boundaries around touching and we're not going to solicit hugs without getting consent to do that first. That could feel really uncomfortable. Sure. So the discomfort of you going through that entire event, though, wondering, is something going to happen? Maybe I should have done this thing. Is that really not as important? I think it might be important.
Yeah. So how do you encourage people who've endured childhood sexual abuse to look at holidays where for some the abuse might have happened during the holidays? For others, it's by people who are present, or it's also just a lot more gatherings, which can create its own form of anxieties. There's so many reasons that we could list on and on, but how do you encourage people to, whether it's reframing the holidays, to do what they can to, if they want to enjoy a holiday, but maybe it doesn't look the same, or maybe they don't go, or maybe they do, but they change something. How do you encourage folks to reframe and reclaim the holiday space?
Yeah. There is a lot coming at us about, like, if we think of the media, if we think of television, if you've walked into like a Winter's Home Sense recently, it's all selling you this idea of what a holiday is supposed to look like. And it's supposed to be massive, and it's supposed to be sparkly or spooky if it's the holidays, or, like pumpkin filled if it's Thanksgiving. And you're supposed to have a gathering, and, it's all about family and connection and coming together. And that sells movies and that sells items on shelves. But the reality is that sometimes that doesn't feel as comfortable for us when we're living through it. And so first, separate yourself from that. Right? Try to create as much distance between this like Hallmark perfect event, and focus on what a perfect event. No, scrap perfect. Let's go with what a good event, what a comfortable event seems like for you. I think that's an important step. The other piece is, so when you're thinking about what does an event that feels comfortable for me looks like, that also means that there's going to be a little bit of grief alongside that, because you don't get that picture perfect Hallmark event, or maybe you don't get the type of holiday that you used to have in the past because you don't want to be around certain people. You don't want to let those people into your home, or whatever boundaries it is that you've set. And so giving yourself a little bit of space to be able to just acknowledge that, and even making space during that holiday to honor that emotion whenever it does come up. Because we can be incredibly hard on ourselves and say, well, you did the pros and cons and you know exactly what you wanted. So why are you upset, right? You should just be okay with it. And the reality is that there is grief and there's difficult emotions that come up when you realize that maybe you couldn't have certain people there that you wanted to have, or that recognition that because of what has happened to you or because what has happened in your family, you don't get to have the type of event that you really would have wanted. So that can be really important as well. And taking time to, so if there was something that you really enjoyed from your holidays early on, but now being in that space feels unsafe, or doing holidays the exact same way feels too triggering, it's also okay to incorporate certain elements of that feel really important for you and trying to make that your own in whatever way fits you, whatever way fits your family now. So you're kind of recreating traditions. If there was a dish that you really enjoyed, bring that dish in, but maybe you don't need to be in the same place. If there were certain decorations that you remember seeing while things were happening to you, it's also okay to not include those in your current celebrations, right? So really focus on it as this is supposed to be a time for me and my family to connect. This is supposed to be a time that feels peaceful and comfortable for me. And think about how you can create that. And that's kind of like the compass. That's the guiding light here of what you want this to be.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Glenn, I'm gonna pull you in here just so you get the heads up before I, 3, 2, 1, and then pull you in. Glenn, I wanted to invite you into this portion of the conversation as we're talking about this navigating, like going into the holiday spaces. Like how have you been able to reclaim the holiday spaces and gatherings to create safety and well-being for yourself?
Could I just ask a question first?
Yeah.
I just asked a question there. Okay, so you say that no is enough of a sentence, but we also just said that telling other people and other adults that we're teaching our children about body awareness, isn't that just the same explanation? Could we not just say no? We are teaching our children about body awareness without having anybody having an assumption of why we said no and stopped.
I think that's a great point. I guess you don't like, I don't deal as much with children, but I imagine like you don't need to if you don't want to, but it can set a nice tone to get everybody kind of involved in creating that safe space. I imagine that being really important.
Okay. Laura?
So, well, I'm Glenn. I sort of, it was me that said, right? Like, no, it's a complete sentence.
Yeah.
What, can you explain that a little bit further? So on the one hand, we're saying,
earlier we were saying that we can tell people that we're teaching our children about body awareness, right? When we go into parties and stuff like that, right? So if somebody just says no to something and without saying that we're, like you just say no, it can lead to assumptions. But if we just say no because we're teaching our children about body awareness, isn't that better than just saying no? Because as human beings, we all make assumptions on no's. Why did they say no? What's wrong with me? I think having a complete sentence after no is a good thing. And just by saying we're teaching our children about body awareness is just absolutely enough.
So fair. I think, Glenn, let me sort of clarify where I was coming from. The no is more specific to boundaries in the sense of not needing to describe, not needing to explain oneself, right? So different. And I just wanted I wanted to make sure that I was clear on that part. So when it comes to the boundaries, no is it. No need for explanation. So no, I don't want to come to this holiday dinner. And that's it. I don't need to explain myself if I don't want to.
Oh, okay. I'm not talking about the child saying no. I'm talking about another adult telling about another adult, to leave the children alone, or that we're teaching our children about that. That's not on the child side, but more on the adult. So the child is just saying no, you can't touch me, right? The child could say no. we're learning about body awareness, I'm not safe with that, or I'm not comfortable with that. How's that?
Yeah, so fair. Yeah,
that's better, right?
Yeah.
Because I always felt that no, it was bad for me unless I had an explanation of why the person was saying no. It makes it a lot easier to accept a no when you know something that maybe because of somebody's history or something like that, right? So
yeah, I hear that.
No.
No, thank you.
I guess,
you, Glenn.
Glenn,
Yeah.
I guess, there's just this piece of with respective boundaries, no is just a no, right?
Yeah.
And that, but no, I hear what you're saying. No can be nuanced based on different circumstances as well, and different sort of experiences, and then different ages, for sure. That's sort of, you're making that distinction.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there is that propensity to explain, and it's almost doing the opposite. I'm just going to say no. And it's going to feel real uncomfortable, like you said, Amelia, for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to say no, and it's going to be okay. However you feel about my no and saying no and coming to your holiday gathering, that's for you to deal with. I'm going to say no. No explanation needed.
What's coming up for me is we like to explain because it sometimes it gives us a sense of control. If we explain it, then we can manage the other person's reaction to what we just said. So if we say no because, or no but, and we offer that explanation, and sometimes I'm not knocking it, right? Like, I say no and give explanations on a regular basis. And if it feels like that's something somebody wants to do or you want to do, go for it, right? It's more so that obligation. We also we can't control how other people are going to react to it. So we can wrap our no with a perfect, valid explanation that makes perfect sense, and they cannot see it.
Yeah.
They could still, yeah, exactly. Because people will ultimately, we're going to see what we want to see. We're going to hear what we want to hear. And sometimes it doesn't actually matter as much what we say. It's more about protecting our own peace. But if protecting your own peace means giving the explanation, give it. Yeah.
Okay, now what was that question that
thank
you
you
asked
all.
me there, Luke?
You railed that one.
This was a great discussion. Love it. Glenn,
I love that point.
I was curious, how have you been able to like reclaim, holidays, gatherings, whatever it is, and like make sure you're taking care of yourself? Like, how have you been able to say, like, I'm gonna, as I move into,
you want honesty? Glenn's an introvert. At holidays and stuff like that,
Yes.
I hardly ever go out. I want to go out. I really want to go out, but I don't feel so safe around other people and situations unless I know them really well. Like I had a previous situation where I was invited to a barbecue for the project that we're part of, and I asked if there was any alcohol going to be drinking there, and they said no. And I went there, and there was alcohol drinking, and there were people that I don't know who are drinking. And that put me into my PTSD, and I had a reaction and everything. I got very yelling and was like, I don't want to be here, and it was really bad. So I feel safe more at home. But even though I still want to go out, I want to be part of people and stuff like that. I want to be there and stuff. It is so hard. It really is. But I just stay at home. I feel like most of the time I'm safe at home, right? Or have family.
Have you been able to make peace? So like peace and compassion in that process. Somebody that wants to go out, but this is where I feel safety.
Yeah. It's kind of hard. It really is. I don't know. My girlfriend's an introvert too, so she likes to stay home also, right? So I'm the one that's always going to her house. She never comes here, right? But I guess I don't know. It's just, it's really weird. I still, I guess, have some parts of the PTSD, thinking that I'm still not a complete person that, a lot of people want to be around and stuff like that. So I figure I just got to keep to myself, and then that way everybody will be happier with, that's sometimes the way I think.
yeah, have you been able to find ways to get your own like holiday space that bring you joy, but also safety?
Well,
Like at
I
home?
guess it was something about going out and helping others at Christmas time is a good thing. So even though I'm by myself, right? If I can go out on the street and maybe offer somebody a meal or something like that, that can make me feel a little bit better at Christmas time, right? So
Yeah.
and doing something for someone else, even though the way I'm feeling about myself and being alone and like I was in group homes, so I never went home for Christmas. I never had birthdays because I was in group homes, right? So um, being alone at Christmas time is almost kind of like what I've grown up with, right? Because
Yeah.
I was in group homes, right. So
Yeah.
and that's the fighting thing, is that I'm stuck in that group home period where I would love to have a big, huge family gathering and all the gifts and people sitting around a big table and talking about stories and, you know, about family events and showing pictures of what they did last summer and stuff like that. That would be awesome, but it's just not my life. You know, it's never been
Yeah.
my life or anything like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love, like, for you, how, or maybe where, like, comes to reaching out for support, whether that's, you know, your girlfriend, like, or, and I know, like, you've been through civil litigation. There's different forms of support. You had fantastic. You had some people really show up for you in the medical community, but like, finding support's really hard
Yes.
for adults who have endured childhood sexual abuse. For you, like, what for you is your invitation to people who are also on that journey and struggling, who are like, hi, but I'm so scared to reach out?
Well, are you asking me how did I find support? Like,
Yeah, well, like, yeah, how, like, or
I,
what would you, for people, go ahead.
well, the way I found support was by talking about it on Facebook. A lot of people might not think that was a brilliant thing to do, but it worked out really nice. As soon as I came out about it, and I had support from other people, and other people were saying, "Thank you very much," because now I can talk about it. That gives me support too, right? So having that support is saying that yes, I experienced this too in my life has support. Some people would message me in Messenger and say, if you need to talk, I'm here, right? So there's support there. So basically, I got a lot of support from Facebook. But yeah, I had my GP, Dr. DeClerc, and my psychiatrist, Dr. Strauss, who helped me in the medical field the most. The most.
Yeah.
My GP, when I tried to commit suicide when I was 25 years old, stood at the end of my bed and gave me shit. He's like, "What are you trying to do? You're only 25 years. You got all these years ahead of you, right?" And I kept that doctor because he cared about me, right? At that moment, I knew that was going to be my doctor, right? And the psychiatrist that I had, he didn't take patients normally. He only took patients if he knew that he could help them, and he came to me and said, "I can help you." So those were my supports. Okay.
Yeah. No, I love that. I want to pull in Stuart into here. Stuart, you're somebody who not only has been able to find support for your own journey, but in Tay out helping people access support. What does finding support look like? Is that always like going to a therapist? Or are there like other steps that people can take?
Well, it's not quite that easy. You know, and I'll speak on my own experience and a little bit from others, what I've seen throughout the years. And I've been doing this a long time now. So I've seen many different scenarios, like everything from people walking up those 5 steps, looking around and being, oh my God, this is not for me, and leaving and coming back and say, okay, I'm ready. But yeah, so to your question, um, like even for myself, you know, I believed I was alone. So a lot of people could be thinking they're alone. And another thing could be too, well, I'm a male. So depending where you are, what country you are, uh, uh, a lot of things could come into play, such as your heritage, right? What does
Mm-hmm.
your culture believe, right? There's so many different things that men have as barriers for wanting to come forward. Being alone, I know that was a big thing for me. Like you, Glenn, I didn't come forward until I was nearly 50. I'm well in my 60s now, but nevertheless, I was brought up to believe that there was no help for men, and little did I realize I was wrong. And even in the USA, there's malesurvivor.org, which is pretty much across the USA. I've worked with them in the past, or I've been part of some of the programs in the past, and they're a great organization, but many men do not know about that, right? Unless you ask. Or you go to a therapist, and maybe your therapist will refer you to there. And think about it. 10 years ago, there wasn't much on the internet.
No.
Right? Or even 15 years ago. 15 years ago, when I found the Gatehouse on the internet, I found them through another agency out west here in Western Canada. Okay. So it's just not that easy. I mean, the barriers, like you could be struggling with addictions, maybe I mentioned feeling that you're alone. It's really, really difficult to pinpoint one particular thing. It could be economics, for example, and geopolitics. There's many different things that could stop men and women as well coming forward for asking help. But I think the biggest thing is that there's not a sense of, if you don't know about it and believe that you're alone, then obviously you're not going to ask about it. How can you come forward and talk about it, right? Or ask questions, or who do you know to ask questions about, right? I didn't know about the Gatehouse. Like I said, I didn't find it from a therapist. I was fed up with my life, and I wanted to open another door. And the only way I was able to do that was to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Not every man or woman will ask questions because maybe they don't feel they deserve it or they're worthy, right? So there's many different doors that will stay closed until you open another door and ask the question, or admit that you need help and to go out there and ask the right questions.
Or if you keep asking, because I asked when I was 6 and I had no support. 16. And then I asked again when I was 21, which would have been 1986. And there was no support back then either, right? So, and then it took me till I was in my 50s to find the support that we have here with Braving Healing and Jeffrey Presler and his team and stuff like that.
Yeah, so. just like myself, absolutely, right? It's not like you can go online, rather, not like you see it in the front page. I mean, that this is available for you to go and help, right? It's just you got to ask the questions and then to be brave enough to do that, right? Hence why we're here. I mean, we're braving having this conversation here, and I just love the word braving. I can never say that enough, because really this whole experience is about braving and finding a way to better yourself, right?
Yeah, because it is a very brave step to take that step forward and start talking about what has happened in your past and sharing it with other people. And, and then it turns out to be a good thing that other people learn that they've had the same experience as you. And now that you're talking about it, they can talk about it. So.
Yeah, I've spoken with many people over the years from not just here in Canada and the US, but from around the world. And, we all kind of say the same thing, but not really, without saying I'm speaking for other people, but I'm not. But a lot of us think we're alone, and a lot of us think we don't deserve the help, and we do, and we do have a right to live and live with best quality of life possible. It's no different than teaching our children consent, to what Rosalia was talking about earlier. If we're able to install these things ahead of time, then maybe our children have a better chance that they won't have to experience what we did growing up to be what we're here now talking about.
I tried to talk to my 13-year-old daughter about it, and I still get the impression that kids think, "Oh, this could never happen to me," or sort of thing, right? And when you're talking to them about it, but you try to tell them that this happened to you, and then this is why you're talking about it. But even at her age of 13 right now, that's something that she doesn't really want to talk about too much, but she knows what her dad has gone through.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Glenn, because I have a daughter as well. She's going to be 40 November 9th. So I'm feeling kind of old these days, but not really. But I'm really glad you mentioned that, because when I started my journey at the Gatehouse here for probably 6 months to 7 months, I didn't speak with my daughter. But she didn't understand why. Well, because I was here. But little did I realize, and I won't get into my long story of how my home got broken up and that kind of stuff. I won't get into that. But I will share this with you. My daughter is a survivor as well. Unfortunately, from my divorce, That happened to my daughter.
Okay.
So with me telling my daughter about my experience, she ended up telling me about her experience. And it's really not for me to talk about that, but I thought it necessary that I do that. I'm not mentioning her name. It's still pretty quiet who she is. And for her to talk about, but this is where open conversation comes in quite very, very, very important, where that kind of open conversation comes in. You know, it's kind of like saying no, like to what you were talking about earlier, right? You know, we don't know how to use, or we don't know how to use these words and this language. It's something that we need to acquire after being told you can't use this language, right? Like being groomed, for example, right? We don't know about language at that time. We just know yes and, you know, this and that, and then growing up as I had, I didn't have any of those boundaries or personal reflections on how I should react in society towards other people. Whether it be good or bad, or any of those reactions, or physical or mental reactions, I did not know how to behave that way, right? Until I learned about myself.
So when I was talking to my daughter, she was not in school. She's with her mom, who is with a new boyfriend, and they're out in the woods hunting. And I was like, all trigger bells go off in my brain, and I'm going, okay, well, what's going on when you're out in the forest? You know, like, are you alone with this gentleman by yourselves, right? Because I don't know really how to explain the grooming part, because I was never groomed in the 70s. I was just showing some pictures and something was done to me, right? So I'm trying to hope that I can explain to my 13-year-old that it's this person that I don't know. I know she knows, her mom knows, they've got children, but you just don't know, and I'm trying to explain that to her, to be careful, like, while she's out there with him, right?
Yeah, well, I hope you find a way to have that conversation. I was lucky enough to have this conversation with my daughter. My daughter's fully aware of what I'm doing and what I do, and I feel very, very honored that she trusts me well enough to have this conversation with her. From hearing from her side as well, right? And this is all about healing too, as well. We talked about generational trauma. We talked about here earlier. My family's full of generational trauma. Which I've never even touched on here, but nevertheless, that conversation is so important to have with your children, whether they're young or whether they're old, helping them educate and understand, not just about our own experience, but hopefully help them so they don't have the same experience we have with their children.
Should we always have that conversation with our children, or is once enough?
Well, I would say, I think Luke wants to step in here, but I would say that would be depending on the level of communication you have with your daughter and how much trust you have between each other. And it's a lot of different things, right? But mainly the trust between each other is where I would start. And if
you definitely don't trust her dad. I've driven her across Canada twice and back, so she definitely trusts her dad.
Well, then all the more reason to have this conversation. And
we've had a little bit of it, right? Because she's at that age right now. So,
but again, it's about your child or your daughter or your children being mature enough also at the same time as well. We also don't want to traumatize them as well by having this conversation. So we also need to be very, very aware of what we're saying to them, even in our own experience. Because again, I talk about generational trauma. We can pass that down to them. So we need to be very careful what we say. And I think Luke wants to step in here.
Yeah. Well, I want to move us into our near final minutes here. But Stuart, I'd love to have you close out with just let us know what is the Gatehouse, your invitation for people to support, also people, because not everybody's going to be in Toronto. But first, I'd love you to briefly touch on how the Gatehouse supports people and how adults who have endured childhood sexual abuse can go find, like, just your quick invitation, like, here's a step you can take.
Yeah, okay. Well, first, I want to thank Art Lockhart for starting this. I mean, I would not have been able to change my attitude towards myself without Art opening up this house. Now, you already know the story anyway, Luke and Kat from meeting Art. So the Gatehouse is a wonderful place. So what we have here is we have 15 weeks programs for men and for women. We also have co-ed programs. And in that 15-week programs, we're going to talk about, when you first come in here, we're going to talk about anger. We're going to talk about shame. We're going to talk about trust. We're going to talk about loss and grief. We're going to talk about your inner child. We're going to talk about addiction. And what I mean about addiction is not just about alcohol and drugs or sex. It can be many, many different things. So it's pretty general. We're going to talk about your sexuality. And again, that is also general as well, because it's very complicated nowadays. But being able to have that conversation in a place that's safe, where there's no judgments. We're not here to tell you what to do. This is strictly peer support. And if you want to continue on with your story, we have another program which is 16 weeks long, and again, another program that was developed by Art Lockhart, and I was one of the first people to be part of this program. If you look on our manual, you'll see my face there, and to this day, I love facilitating those programs that are created. But that's 16 weeks, and in that 16 weeks, we allow you to focus more on your story versus, and in the first 15 weeks, we're talking about your feelings and where do they associate, or rather, where do they belong with what happened to you in your childhood of sexual abuse, and understanding, what they mean to you or what they don't mean to you. But in the second phase of it, as I was talking about, we talk about your story, and we can also go back and talk about some of the things we talked about in phase one. We could be talking more about anger. We could talk more about shame. Any of those things are pretty very involved conversations most of the time that I've seen, and I've done many groups here facilitating, and I've seen many different people coming through. But the conversation can go any different way, and what I like about it, it's very safe here. Everybody has a chance to speak or not to speak, and there's no judgment. So if you're in a room with 8 people, men and women, or just men or just women, your facilitator will come around and ask you if you'd like to share something to whatever the topic may be. All you got to do is say pass. And you got to think about it. From our abuse, I know from my abuse, I was always not to speak, right? So I lost my voice. So even if you don't talk about anything and you just say pass, again, that's you exercising your voice, where maybe you never had that choice, that chance to do that in the past, right? So it's wonderful program. It taught me how to love myself, and I've seen it happen to many other people throughout the years. And I'll forever be grateful for the rest of my life for having this program in place. We also offer many other programs as well, extension programs such as Inner Child. We talk more about shame. Shame is really a really big thing. Boundaries is a huge thing. Just what we were talking about earlier. Learning to say no and not feeling guilty about it can be really a task for a lot of people. Whether you're a survivor or not survivor, depending on whether you've had trauma experience or not, really makes no difference. It's something that you need to learn, rather something that we need to try to learn, I should say, right, over a period of time, and not feel guilty about saying no. So yeah, and plus we are always doing something around the Gatehouse here, not just in person but online as well. Unfortunately, we can only service Canada. We can't service the US for the insurance reasons, as vice versa. You guys can't do the same for up here as well. But other than that, I don't know how much more I could tell you, other than, oh yes, if you're in the Greater Toronto Area, November 5th coming up, we have an event coming up. It's called, what's wrong with me? Man Enough to Heal. And in this concept of men sitting around table, women are invited to come as well. But we're going to challenge our beliefs on why we can't heal, or why we don't deserve that we should be able to heal, right? So we're always doing something. But that's our next event that's coming up, and I don't know how much more I can say. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Stuart. I love you all so much in the work that you do at the Gatehouse. So thegatehouse.org, check that out. I'm going to transition as brief. I have a couple things I want to go through here on the, and then we're going to have Arthur come in and give us a send off. So let me look over here briefly. Quick shout out to the fact that this is possible because a wonderful human named Jeffrey Presler chooses to make this possible financially. So very much thank you to them. If you haven't checked out our films, we have at least 10 plus counting films on our YouTube channel covering all kinds of wonderful things. For the folks who are aware of Braving Healing, we have 4 really big, exciting things coming up. One is our documentary that is feature length. I'm going to give you a 1-minute trailer here in just a moment. This has been a culmination of over 2,500 hours of work, and we're like so close to being done. We have a really cool thing that we've only told a couple of folks about, is the Braving Healing Compass. This is going to be a tool more to come on that. We have a wonderful report we're working on with people who've been through criminal, civil, and restorative justice to explore different paths to justice. And we have a Braving Healing podcast, which I feel desperately in need of after having to clip all of these conversations short tonight. Okay, so without ado, from a resource standpoint, all these are meant to be resources for folks, but I want to share a quick 1-minute trailer, and then we're going to look at one question from the comments, and then we're going to have Arthur ground us before we send off. So here is a trailer for the forthcoming documentary, Braving Healing.
Nobody here wants children to be abused. And if I would tell you that something is wrong, you would say, yeah, Gila, let's go and deal with that. But if I say your neighbor is the one you have to call about, that is when there is a sudden, no, it can't be.
We try to put that experience into that same little category in our brain that says good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people.
Most of my clients think I should have done something about it, even if they're 6 years old.
And so if something bad happened to me, I must have caused it.
The other piece that was always in my head, people would say, how could that be? People wouldn't believe me.
Okay, let's load Arthur in. That was, by the way, documentary. If you follow us on YouTube, is probably the best way to get updates. We have more trailers in the works. Documentary will be done next week, but it should be released very soon. But Arthur, we've had this whole long epic session that I feel like I would want to go on for hours more, but it's also 10 o'clock Eastern.
Do we want to do the question first?
Oh, you know what?
Yes.
I forgot. Actually, you know what, Arthur? Let's answer this question together. I forgot. There was the question that I really like this question because it's one we've wrestled with in so many different ways, which is just the idea that. So here we go. I don't know if this has been touched on, but I've been told that I may have been abused. Not definitely. So I don't feel valid as a victim. Is there any advice you can give me? So Arthur, I'd love for you to explore this question because I feel like this is just from a space of how does somebody internalize this kind of situation?
I think what I would say is, in a way, it leads us into the grounding that what's gone on here this evening, from the minute Kat commented about having been harmed in the very beginning, and then Laura made some comments about the concept of words and the concept of language, and then listening with Glenn and Stuart just now, and all the voices that went in between the last couple of conversations. What was really going on there in my mind, which was quite beautiful, is the idea that the expression of vulnerability is actually a demonstration and an expression of personal courage. And that personal courage gives the space for social courage to unfold. And what's happening here right now, what you are doing through Braving Healing right this minute, what everybody else is doing through the different programs, what Rosalia is involved in, everybody that's been talking this evening, is engaging in social courage. We are creating the space and the place and momentum for people to tell their stories, to have their voice come out. So if somebody says, I don't feel valid as a victim, we sit with that. And we simply say, just what else would you like to say? And all of a sudden, the story comes out. The house, the gatehouse, the programs that we do began with somebody saying, I just want to tell my story.
Yeah.
They didn't be fitted into any modality, wanted to tell their story. Here this evening for the past couple of hours, people telling their stories in a variety of ways. And so that's what we want to always create, that space. There's something that looks like a form of Tai Chi, really, And we say about facilitating at the Gatehouse, we say facilitation is the art of doing nothing, but doing it really well and creating that space, and that's so that somebody begins to tell their story. That's what we want to be doing. And that's what you did beautifully this evening. All of you, every one of you did that exact thing. Encouraged people's stories. It's a form of personal courage that leads to social courage. In the United States, just the other day, over something like 7 million people walked in the streets of a huge country to make a statement. That's a form of personal courage. People's voices coming out in a way, not aggressive, but in a way that says, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I need to express. That's what Braving Healing is doing right here today. Everything that you did tonight. The last thing I would say is, oftentimes people will say the phrase, eyes are windows to the soul. Mm-hmm. I think what Laura said at the beginning, words are windows to the soul. And how do we create the space for people to tell their story with their own words? And that's what you are doing here so beautifully this evening. So all the listeners in, if we all of us, every one of us, just right now, it only take us 2 seconds to do it. Just take a nice deep breath in and out. Just one more breath in and out. When you go finish up this evening, if there's a way to spend a few minutes to stay with some other human being, thank you. However that happens, you may thank yourself or some other human being just to say thank you this evening. For everybody that's been listening, for everybody that's been speaking, and just see what unfolds. Have a beautiful evening. Much love to everybody.
Thank you so much, Arthur. I'm gonna load everybody in here for our final send-off and good night and goodbye. I think for everybody it's a good night at this point. So let me just say thank you to all of you for coming on this journey with us tonight. Thank you for all the people who tuned in throughout this whole process. And I just want to say I feel so grateful getting to know each one of you. My only sorrow is in time constraints, which but I just want to invite, I don't know if anybody has any last final thought that they'd like to share before as we send off. Just I'll go through one by one so it's not all of us talking at once, but if you have one just final thought you just want to share before we end the live stream, I'll start from bottom up. Kelly and Justine, any last things you'd like to share before we sign off?
It was just an honor to participate, and we learned so much this evening, like incredible amount, great discussions, and thank you so much to all of the speakers.
Yes, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate you sharing and appreciate being involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosalia.
Thanks. So I just want to say thank you to all the speakers as well, and everyone who's here watching live or watching the replay. And like just that alone, I hope it helps remind you that you're not alone, and to also remind you to seek out your allies, because when you talk about this topic, you'll be surprised at how many people actually chime in and say either me too or I want to help. And you do have support. You don't have to do all of this on your own. It's not just about all the heavy lifting for just parents. They can, have support with this work beyond the holidays as well. So just, have the courage, like Arthur was saying, when we have, I love that. And I actually wrote it down. Personal courage leads to social courage. I might have to steal that, but I will give you credit, Arthur, because I love that. And I think that that's so, so important. Like, the more we talk about this, the more we all have the courage to talk about it, and we normalize these conversations. which is how we help protect kids. So thank you for having me.
Yes, I love all of that. Thank you. Amelia.
Of course, all the speakers, everybody who's on this screen right now, I think it's so wonderful we were able to come together and talk about this topic. I really want to just shout out or really express gratitude to all the people who are watching this, because we can talk all we want and we can spread all the information, but if no one's watching it and no one's attending these events, then it's not reaching the homes, the living rooms, the classrooms where it's actually essential. So I feel so much gratitude that this event occurred, but also for all of you who have made the time in your life to actually watch it and to try to support the children in your lives. I think that's really important. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Amelia. Stuart?
Yeah, well, thank you all for having me here today. Really wonderful to meet you all and hear you speak as well. This is really a Me Too moment. I really hope everybody kind of catches on to that. You're not alone, as Rosalia mentioned as well. We've all said that. But I think most importantly, moving forward through into the holidays, I will leave you with this message. As I pointed out, Me Too, you're not alone. If you're struggling, please reach out to somebody. There's somebody out there listening. Somebody will listen. There's a 24-hour hotline. Somebody will listen, but don't. Please try not to sit home and ruminate all this crap you might have been through. There's somebody out there who will listen. I know I would listen. Give me a call. I will listen. You're not alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Laura?
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you all for including me and sort of bringing me into this discussion. What a powerful place to have been able to be and to sit. The holidays are so difficult, and I know that this has been said already, so it might sound a little redundant, but I'm going to say it anyway. Third time's a charm, perhaps, but lean in. You are not alone. Lean in, find support somehow, some way, to carry you through. So important.
Thank you. Glenn?
I'd like to say thank you to everybody too. And also, the holidays can be stressful, which can lead to changes in adult behavior and supervised levels. Be a support system for your children. Watch for signs of stress in other caregivers or adults and offer support to help reduce family tension. Check in with your children at Christmas time or holidays. Regular check-ins with children's even simple open-ended questions like, how are you feeling about the people here? Or what is the best thing you did today can create natural openings for them to share their concerns. If a child discloses abuse, remember to believe them. Remain calm and praise their bravery for telling you. Do not confront the alleged abuser yourself. Instead, report your concerns to the proper authorities like Child Protective Services or local police. Thank you again for your courage in raising this vital topic.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Art, any last thoughts?
An invitation. An invitation for people to go and take a look at a website called the Global Poetry Movement. And the invitation is to write a poem. Write a poem in a way that expresses where you are at this moment in time. And my suggestion with that is that poem helps generate social courage. It creates social momentum, social change. That is happening right now. And I would invite people to be part of that and to echo everybody else's words. To say to another human being, I love you. How long does that take to say? And see what happens.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Whew. I mean, I think the imposter syndrome sets in hard in instances like this because nor am I a person of, I'm not a person that is a psychiatrist or an expert, only lived on my experience and what I hope to bring to the world because of my experience. And when Braving Healing came to the table, I saw that as a chance to make something bigger. And I am thankful for everyone that came to speak tonight to give their different perspectives and expertise. As someone who has endured their own sets of abuse. I know that a lot of people will gain so much knowledge from this and beauty. So if anything, thank you. And for those watching, I hope that you find yourself not alone, but also educated and knowledged and have resources to move forward.